Welcome into episode 6 of Talk with Tati. I've got my assistant Shadow here. He will be joining the discussion today. Just kidding, he left. Today's topic is something I've wanted to discuss the whole time, and I'm sure you guys can already guess what it is. Well, you probably saw the description and the title, but pretend you didn't. Today's topic is going to be let's talk mental health. So, this is honestly my second time filming because the first time I filmed, I somehow filmed in slow mo. I don't know, but it's okay because I wanted to redo the video anyway. But of course, something like that would happen to me. But today, we're going to discuss mental health. I'm just going to pretty much just be talking mental health. There's really not any type of structure or anything that I'm attempting to follow because the mental health field is so vast. I really just want to talk. Like, literally, we're just going to talk with Tati today. And this is just a trigger warning because I will be discussing mental health. I may discuss some things that will be kind of upsetting to some people. So just want to throw that out there. Just warning for you. I will be talking about depression, anxiety, a little bit of suicide. So definitely heads up. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so I do kind of want to discuss some things to do with mental health, my personal experiences, because what I'm trying to gain from this video is helping everybody else out. We all struggle with some form of mental illness, I'm sure, so I just really felt like this was a good time to have this talk. I do know that a lot of my friends have been struggling, a lot of people around me have been struggling with depression and whatnot here lately, so I thought what better time to do this. Everything that I talk about in my videos does tie back into mental health. Obviously, I'm in school to be a therapist, so it's only expected that I would do something like that. But something that I did talk about in some of my previous videos is people you have in your life. That topic is going to probably always come up in my videos because people are very influential in our lives, whether we like to admit it or not. People we come in contact with influence our everyday behaviors, our lifestyles. If people around you make up you, in a sense. For me personally, I struggle with depression and anxiety. I still struggle with my anxiety a little bit, my depression, not so much. But I will get more into that and more into how I cope with depression and anxiety. But I kind of first just want to give some background. So, back in 2019, I had my birth control switch. So I've been taking birth control since I was like 17. I do have polycystic ovarian syndrome, and it is a pretty much a metabolic condition that affects like my ovaries and everything. So it to regulate my hormones, I was taking birth control, right? Well, the birth control I was taking was Yas. It's a really popular brand, and my insurance had switched from the insurance I had as a teenager to an employer insurance. So it wasn't as good as my other insurance. So I ended up having to pay more out of pocket, and it was expensive amount. It was like $100 for a 28 pack. And that is times 12. I was like, no, there's no way I'm going to be able to pay this kind of money just to take my birth control. So I asked my doctor to switch my birth control to something cheaper. Now, their birth control, the pill is typically progesterone based and estrogen based. I was taking one for the longest and then I was switched to the other. I can't really remember which one it was at this point, but I ended up having my birth control switched to the different, I guess, hormone. And that's when my depression really kicked off. The purpose of me telling you that, I just want to make it clear. I'm going to talk about some things in this, and I don't want it to look like I'm pointing blame at anybody for my depression. I do think my depression stems from birth control. I have since got off of birth control because I couldn't do it anymore. It had my mental health in shambles. So I just needed to give that context so that it doesn't seem like I'm pointing fingers or that I'm blaming anybody, because I'm not blaming anybody for my depression. I mean, there are people and things that contributed it to it being worsened, which is what I'm going to discuss. But I just want to put that out there. I don't want anybody getting butthurt. Don't come for me. Please don't come for me. But yeah, so I had my struggle with depression. It's since under control. Like I said, I got off of birth control. I ended up getting onto Lexapro, so that helps with my anxiety, which in turn helps to keep my depression down. I do still have days where I kind of slip into that depression where I don't really want to be bothered and I just want to sleep, but it's not near as frequent as it was. I'm talking, I was depressed for like, I would say a 2 year period, just straight depressed. Like it was horrible. But okay, enough about my depression. I want to actually kind of get into some of the things that I've been through and some of the things that worsened my depression so that we can talk through ways to effectively cope and ways to improve your mental health. So I know I've mentioned my relationship with my ex multiple times. It'll probably come up a few more times. I'm trying not to dwell on it too much, but it's relevant to the conversation, okay? But, you know, as I'm sure everybody knows at this point, I was in a long-term relationship with my ex, and there was just things that went on between us that made my mental health a lot worse. And I've always been that kind of person. I've always kind of been a people pleaser, and I've always been one to consider everybody else's feelings above my own. And being in a relationship with someone who doesn't really acknowledge your mental health is an issue and just, I don't know how to explain without, I don't want to make him sound like a bad person, but some people just aren't capable of understanding mental illness, and they're not capable of being there for you because they don't understand. And so my relationship with my ex made my depression 10 times worse. I kind of felt alone all the time. I can think back to always feeling alone, and there were just times where I just wanted, sometimes I would want to be held, sometimes I would want to be left alone, and he couldn't understand it. And a lot of people don't understand. I think mental illness is a big deal breaker in relationships. You know, I'm working on it myself. I've got it under control for the most part, I'd like to say. But at the end of the day, I have to prioritize myself and I have to prioritize my mental health. So, a big way that I did that, obviously, we broke up, but I did have to cut him off completely. And that's particularly hard for me because I've said it before. I don't like to cut off people I love. Like, I want to stay in contact with people I love, make sure you're good and you're okay. But what I can't do is stay in contact with someone who makes it hard for me to be the person I want to be. So, just a warning, I'm going to tell something that I've mentioned, but I haven't gone into detail with. So, it's probably not something many people know. And I know you're going to probably think, oh my God, we're speaking about past Tatiana, not present Tatiana. Mom, don't look at me like that. This is in the past. I've wised up. I'm definitely not going to do this, but just hear me out, okay? So, just gonna start from the beginning. Me and my ex broke up January 2021. He moved out like June of 2021. It was literally the day after I started my job, which is kind of crappy in itself. But whatever. I digress. But yeah, so once he moved out, that gave us time apart. We didn't really speak to each other for like the first month. And eventually we were on speaking terms. I have my dogs that he still comes and sees, or he was still at that point seeing. And yeah, so obviously my feelings for him did not just disappear because we broke up and he moved out. And we had that space, which I think was something that we always needed. So, kind of having that space, I did kind of start to have feelings for him. I was kind of wanting to be around him more, hang out with him more, and maybe rekindle our relationship. And so, for like months after the fact, we would be talking. You know, I would profess my love, send him messages and stuff. And, you know, he was kind of dodgy with me. And looking back at it, it was obvious why, but you know, they say hindsight is 2020. I almost said 420. Hindsight is 2020, not 420. But yeah, so fast forward till April of this year. I was at orientation for grad school, got to meet my classmates, my professors, had an amazing time. I'm so excited for grad school. Let me just add that in there. But I got a missed call. Now, I saw the caller ID and I recognized the name, and it was somebody that my ex works with, his boss particularly. Anyway, so I was like kind of panicked because I was like, why is she calling me? How does she have my number? Like, I immediately start to think the worst. I'm like, oh my God, something happened to my ex. Like, something happened. And so I'm freaking out because this was hours before I noticed. Like I said, I was at grad school orientation and I wasn't on my phone. And then I had like a 30-minute drive back home from campus. So I wasn't really paying attention to my phone. So when I noticed it, obviously I was in a panic because I'm a worrywart. I'm always worried about everybody. And so I try to call her. She doesn't answer. I try to call him. He's not answering. And so I'm really like, oh my God, what is going on? And then once that panic kind of calmed down, I called one of my best friends, Aaliyah, and was talking to her. And I was just like, there's no way this is what I think. Like, surely this isn't what I think. This isn't somebody playing on my phone. This isn't somebody being petty. Like, that's definitely not what's happening. Oh, but let me tell you, that's definitely what did happen. So come to find out, I talked to him, she texts me. I'm clearly upset because this whole time I'm like, I've been sending you these messages. I've been, you know, overstepping. I would never overstep like that if I knew that he had a girlfriend. And so I was just pissed because I was like, he didn't tell me. I had to find out from someone else. Which for me, I'm a very open and understanding person. You can come to me with just about anything, and I will make sure I meet you with respect, no matter how irritated or upset I am with you about it. And so for him to not come to me and let somebody else come to me really upset me. But what really made me even more upset, this woman is twice my age and is talking about she was just feeling insecure. Now, that's a problem in itself, and that's something that someone more qualified would probably need to address. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just telling the story because I just want to make it clear that things like that are not okay. At any point in time, he could have been honest with me. I know it's not his responsibility. He didn't have to do that. And really, it was none of my business, but I was put into the situation. I was just minding my business, just living my life, and was put into somebody else's relationship problem. And I even got to hear them argue. Imagine how traumatic it is to listen to your ex argue with someone else who they're romantically involved with. So I think at this point you're probably fuming listening to this, and you're probably like, F that dude. I feel like that some days too, but for me, I just really am protecting my mental health, and I tried to remain friends with him, and I tried just for the sake of keeping things as copacetic as possible. I tried to be cordial, but there's only so much that we should have to put up with. My ex knows that I have depression, and my ex knows I deal with anxiety, and that kind of situation really, really could have put me over the edge. Thankfully, though, I'm at a better place mentally. So, yeah, it did hurt for a few days. I was very cloudy and I was very worried that because I felt like I was going through a depressive episode, and I'm sure that's probably what it was. But when you're in depression, it feels never ending. So that situation really caused me some problems the first few days. Luckily, like I said, my mental health is a little better, so it didn't affect me that much. But for me, he doesn't know that. He knows I deal with it, and he knows that certain things trigger. I have certain triggers. We all have triggers. And for that situation to be allowed to happen, and I never got an apology from either of them. Never got an apology for bringing me into the situation, for being disrespectful, nothing. And so, with that being said, I just decided recently that it's just best to cut off all contact. I can't do that. I have to protect my mental health at all costs. Like I said, I have triggers and I know certain things trigger me, and I just really I love the person I am. I love the person I'm becoming. I'm in love with myself at this point. I know that sounds crazy, but we should all be in love with ourselves, and I'm in love with my future. Every time I'm feeling down, I listen to My Future by Billie Eilish, and it just reminds me that I'm where I need to be. But that brings me into people who don't consider your mental health, because that situation, no, that shouldn't have happened to anybody. I'm not saying that because I deal with depression and anxiety that nobody should ever bring anything my way. I prefer nobody does. And I'm just simply saying, for me, if I know that something specific would trigger somebody, I would do my hardest to not let that happen. And if it did happen, I would at least acknowledge that it did happen and apologize. But I get it. Not everybody's Tatiana. Not everybody thinks like Tatiana. But it just brings me into the fact that it is so important to watch who you have around you. And I know I've said this many times. I said this in my friendship video, I think my relationship video, but it is very, very important to watch who you have in your circle. Because in that situation, I don't want people around me who don't consider my mental health when they're doing things. Like I said, you don't want people around you anyway who bring anything but happiness to your life. If they bring constant sorrow and pain, it's time to let them go. And I understand that's hard. It's hard for us to let people go. It was hard for me to let my ex go. I mean, it's still hard some days. I'm not even going to pretend that I still don't have those days, but it's just more so I want to live a happy life, and I want to make sure that my depression and anxiety don't rule my life like they used to. And to do that, I just have to make sure I have people around me that bring happiness. I can't have somebody around me whose girlfriend is going to call me every time she's insecure, because for one, that's kind of messed up, because the way our relationship ended, it was sudden and abrupt. There really wasn't any closure. There still isn't any closure, and it was like throwing salt back into an already open wound. And then I know I've had experience as well, like when I was really into depression, I there was times where people would be like, you just need to change your mindset. And I get it. Having a good mindset is very important to keeping your mental health in check and improving your mental health. But if you've ever truly dealt with depression, or, dealt with somebody with depression, you understand that that's not possible. It's not a light switch. Depression isn't a light switch. You don't just switch it on and off. There isn't a magical pill that cures it. There are antidepressants and treatments, but there's nothing that really cures depression. And when I was going through that, it kind of sucked to hear people say that, because it kind of feels like people are placing blame on me for having depression. And that's really hard to hear when you're already feeling pretty crappy about yourself. But with that being said, people that are like that, I don't necessarily say they're bad people. I mean, people just don't know. Like, not everybody was privileged enough to go to college and have a degree in psychology. Not everybody wants to do that. And that's fine. Some people are blessed to not have to deal with depression. And I love that for them. So I'm not saying that they're bad people. They just simply don't understand. But the point of this is to kind of try to help people understand and help people cope who do deal with depression. And I just, like I said, they're not bad people, but people like that are not people I talk to and keep in my circle anymore. You should have encouraging, loving, just inspirational people in your life, people who acknowledge, yes, you have depression. Yes, I think there's things you could do to better it, but I'm not going to put you down for it. And depression is referred to as the silent killer, and I think that is very true. Kind of tying back into what I was saying about people saying it's a mindset thing. One thing that commonly comes with depression and why it's called the silent killer is because it can definitely lead to suicide. I don't know anybody personally that has depression that has not struggled with suicide, suicidal ideations, suicide attempts. Like, it's kind of goes hand in hand with depression. But I just remember when I was really depressed, I got to this point where I was just like, I did not want to live anymore. I was like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. Now, it wasn't for selfish reasons that I felt like that. I just did not want to feel that way. I don't really know how to describe depression to someone who doesn't deal with it. But the way I can think to describe it is, imagine those days where you wake up and you're super groggy and you don't want to be bothered and you're feeling sad and you don't have any excitement for anything. Imagine that, but consistently. That's what depression feels like for me. And like I said, it sucked. I remember just thinking, is this is never going to end? I'm going to feel like this forever. And the thought of feeling like but being depressed forever was terrifying. So I'm like, I don't want to feel like this all the time. I don't want to spend my whole life feeling like this. Thankfully, I'm doing much better and I have been able to actively keep my depression in control. But it just goes back to when people would say you need to change your mindset. Because for me, I was already feeling like nothing and I already felt like I didn't have a purpose. I didn't know I was on this earth. And to hear someone say that if I changed my mindset, I would feel better, it's heartbreaking, honestly. And I just think it all just comes back to people just don't understand. But lack of understanding or ignorance is not an excuse to not be empathetic toward people. And I get it. There's people out there that aren't capable of showing that kind of empathy. But statements like that, I hate them so much. Even a few weeks ago, someone that I know from the past, it was dealing with some struggles with suicide. And under the post, I had saw a few comments made where it was just simply say get help, or pretty much insisting that they were attention seeking. And I know sometimes people do attention seek for suicide, but I feel like for one, that's not your call to make. Because by doing that, if that person is truly struggling, you are already beating a person down who's really ready to give up. And for two, you never know who's actually reading those comments. Maybe, say, a person is on Facebook just attention seeking, but you know who did see that comment? Because they probably don't care. The people who did see those comments are people who were actually struggling as well. And so I say it is so, so important to watch who you have around you. And I just truly hope that that person that's struggling did not read those comments, because reading them broke my heart for them. Because it's like, who are you to say someone's attention seeking? Who are you to just throw out that they should get help? I have a degree in psychology and I'm going to grad school to be a counselor. And I still couldn't tell you specifically what to do if you're wanting to commit suicide. Anybody can say easily get help, but are you actually going to help them get to those steps? Do you actually know what to do for them? Chances are you probably don't, because I don't either. I know they have the suicide line. I know you can see a therapist, but those things are not the only thing that someone who's dealing with that would need. And so I just really, really want to stress, like, I seriously don't think anybody watching this would ever do something like that. Because, like I said, I don't surround myself with people who are like that. But I just think it's just keep your opinions to yourself, honestly, especially when it comes to people's mental health, because mental health is not textbook. Like, yes, there's obviously the DSM-5 for diagnoses and everything like that, but everybody is different and everything is variable. Nothing follows a linear path with mental health. So you can't look at someone and say, "Oh, they're just attention seeking," because how do you know that? Everybody presents symptoms differently. Everybody is different. So I just, even if it seems like clearly they are, keep it to yourself. That's not for you to point out, and that's not for you to decide on. And it is just so, so important to keep your mental health in check if you can, because honestly, yes, it sucks when it's a mind thing, but there is something called somatic syndrome disorder. Somatic syndrome disorder is just, in a nutshell, it's when you are dealing with something mentally and it begins to cause physical ailments. So for me personally, I last year I was dealing with really bad acid reflux. And I've had issues with acid reflux since I was younger. And I could never figure out why. I wasn't eating super greasy foods. I don't usually eat super greasy foods because my stomach just can't tolerate them. And so I could not figure out why last year I was having the worst heartburn and acid reflux. So I would get it just from drinking water. Like, literally anything that I consumed gave me acid reflux. It got so bad that I was like, I'm fine. I was telling my mom, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is horrible. Like, I'm going to a doctor. Like, my stomach would consistently hurt. I'd be consistently nauseous, and I could not figure out why. I thought maybe my gallbladder was needing to be removed. It got that bad. And then all the ultrasounds, everything, they looked at my liver, my pancreas, they looked at everything. everything came back normal. And at that point, I was just kind of giving up. I've dealt with my share of crappy doctors, more than I'd like to admit. So I was like, you know what? I'm just not even going to fight it at this point, which is bad. You should always fight, advocate for yourself. But after a while, you just get kind of irritated with it. So I went back to my primary doctor and I was just kind of like, well, I mean, I obviously can't get anything done about this. And I kind of had the suspicion, though, that it could have been somatic because I was just like, this just makes no sense. And at that time, the beginning of 2021 was highly stressful. I had lost my job because of COVID. So I started working a new job that I absolutely hated. It was super stressful. It was actually when I was a mortgage CSR, getting cussed out all the time, people yelling at me. They had what was called a help queue, but if you called it, oftentimes you'd be met with an attitude. You're pretty much discouraged from using it. And so it was just like such a toxic situation. And like, of course, I said, the problems with my ex, it was just really hard. I also had applied for grad school the end of December after I graduated, into 2020 when I graduated, and I didn't get into grad school. And so it was like I had a lot of things going on at once, and my life was kind of in shambles. Even thinking about it right now kind of has my stomach a little upset. So, anyway, I asked my doctor if I could be put on a mild anti anxiety. So, I ended up being put on Lexapro. I got off birth control. And after maybe a month or so, I stopped having acid reflux and stopped having stomach problems. And it's crazy because you hear people say stress is a killer, like it's not good to stress, but you never really actually think about it until it happens to you. And it's crazy because I ended up being diagnosed with anxiety disorder, and literally my anxiety was causing me GI problems. How insane is that? And that's just why I really stress that it's important to try to keep your mental health in check, because it can become physical. And when you start dealing with things like with your stomach, it really affected my life because I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to be around people. Like I never felt good, and I constantly had to use the bathroom. And besides issues with your stomach, you could also experience pain in your body. Obviously, stress can lead to strokes, heart attack. Heart disease is a number one killer. Increased levels of stress can also cause that. So it's very, very important. Mental health is so important. I've always found myself saying, like, if you don't have a good mental health, what do you have? Because our brain literally is us. Our personality is us. And if you don't have your mental health in check, it's just very hard to function and be a person. And with the way today's society moves, that's kind of impossible. Like, we have to work, we have to do things, or life will just keep going without us. And obviously, most of us probably understand that mental health is very important, but we never really break it down as why it's so important. And I think it's particularly hard for a lot of us to speak about mental illness because the generations before us, they make it seem like we're just sissies or we're pussies. I hate that word, I'm sorry. But that's just the way they say it. Like, they just make it seem like we're just sensitive and we don't know how to cope and handle things. And I do want to throw in there that our lack and inability of coping comes from what we're shown. So you can't really blame younger generations for the inability to cope because they learned it from someone. And older generations typically don't acknowledge mental health, and that is a problem. That is a huge problem. And then to top things off, it's like when they do acknowledge mental health, they're doing it in an insulting way. Something else that I wanted to mention that really has helped me with my mental health that I never really realized until reflecting back on it, having structure in my life. So my life is pretty routine. I of course have my work schedule, I have my gym schedule. Everything is pretty mapped out in my life. But within doing that, I also make sure that I leave extra room. So if I have to fit something in, it's not as stressful. Because with stress comes anxiety. And when it comes to anxiety with me, everything's bad. So I really can keep my mental health on track by making sure I have structure, make sure I have things planned out, timed out. I'm the kind of person that I don't like to plan everything to a T, because if something doesn't go the way I like, it causes problems. Like I've said, I have a little bit of an issue with being a control freak. I'm working on it, but I acknowledge the fact that I have those issues, so I make sure I do things to keep it from being a problem. So like having things scheduled out. When I make appointments, I get my lashes done, I get my brows done and everything. I try to make them around the same time when I get them done. So like I'll stick to a certain day around a certain time. And that way it kind of helps me stay accountable. And sometimes I'm really forgetful, especially back when I was really depressed. I would just forget, like I would always forget about my eyebrow appointments. It was crazy. But keeping that routine makes things a little less stressful for me. And not only that, but it's a lot less daunting on me because I'm used to everything. I'm one of those people that when I get a routine, my brain is instantly like, okay, it's time to do this. Like even on days I don't work, I still wake up around the same time I would for work. So by having like my appointments at the same time, you know, obviously not the same days, but like, you know, I have my appointments on a set day. Like I usually do my appointments on Saturdays in the morning time, so that if I choose, like I want to go down to my hometown, or if I want to do something, then I have the rest of my day open. And also because it's always in my head, okay, I did this, now I have this to do. And it's just so much more helpful for me, because like I said, I am super forgetful, and with depression and anxiety, everything definitely goes out the window, and my brain just is kind of like scribbled. I don't know how to explain it, but nothing's going on, obviously. So having that structure in my life definitely makes things a lot easier. I don't have to stress as much, so I'm not dealing with my anxiety and my depression being so bad. And I never would have thought, like, it's obvious thinking about it now, but like I said, hindsight is 2020. But yes, structure is so important. Not even with mental health. Structure is important with pretty much day-to-day life. Like it really helps, and it really alleviates some of the unnecessary stresses that we put on ourselves. So this talk I feel like was very much needed, because like I said, I've seen a lot of friends that are struggling with depression right now. Seasonal depression usually happens for myself and a lot of people around like November, you know, in the fall, when it starts to get cold and gloomy and it gets darker, so we're getting less sunlight. It gets darker earlier, so we're getting less sunlight. But I do feel like around this time of year, it gets really hot. Life, I don't know, the summer just seems to progress so fast. But I also feel like this is another time where there's a little bit of seasonal depression. So I just kind of wanted to talk and just, you know, be be there for everybody. I'm the therapist friend, that's what I do. I just really love these videos, and that's the whole point of my channel, is to be able to reach a bigger audience, because I have a very busy life, and I'm not always able to check in with everybody individually. But with these videos, in a way, I feel like I can check in and let people know, like, I'm still here, still thinking about you. Even if you don't hear from me for months at a time, I'm still always thinking about you, checking up on your Facebook to see if you're okay. I just woke up feeling a little better today. I did have those issues with traveling back to Oklahoma after my vacation. It was a pretty good time. Got to watch one of my best friends get married, got to meet her family, meet her husband's family. It was a really good experience. But when I filmed that other video on Thursday, I was dead tired. And I was just feeling a little inspirational and well rested today. So I was like, let's talk mental health. I'm thinking for my next video, it'll definitely be mental health as well, especially because I've kind of talked about it today. I want to kind of talk about the correlation between mental health and upbringing and like crime, because y'all know I love true crime. Well, if you didn't, you do now. But I definitely think I want to make a true crime video and kind of tie it into mental illness and upbringing, and just because there is a correlation between your upbringing and indicators of how you turn out. I know you're probably like, what does that mean? You'll have to tune in and see. But once again, thank you so much for being here with me. I know this talk was probably a little jumbled. I'm jumbled all the time. If you've ever had a conversation with me, you know that. But I do appreciate it. As always, thank you so much for sharing your valuable time with me. I hope that this video helps you in your day. If you ever need me or you need anything, you know where to find me. Have a great day. Happy Sunday. Stay safe out there. Stay cool. Bye. Say bye, Shadow. Say bye. Shadow says bye.